Good morning, members, and welcome to the 20th day of session. March the 5th, 2026, 68th Wyoming Legislature budget session. Going to have a wonderful and very productive day, ladies and gentlemen, as we pull to a close here of this budget session. I hope all of our members are here and go quickly assembled. Chief Clerk will please take the roll.
Alamand, Andrew, Angelos, Banks, Bear, Brady, Bratton, Brown Gary, Brown Landon, Byron, Campbell Lisa, Campbell Kevin, Chestick, Clouston, Connolly, Davis, Erickson, Filer, Fornstrom, Geringer, Guggenmoss, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Heft, Jarvis, Johnson, Kelly, excused, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson JT, Lawley, Lean, Locke, Lucas, McCann, Nicholas, Ottman, Pendergraft, Posey, Provenza, Riggins, Rodriguez-Williams, Schmid, Sherwood, Singh, Smith, Storer, Strock, Stivar, Tarver, Thayer, Washut, Wasserberger, Webb, Weber, Worf, Williams, Winter, Wiley, Yin, Mr. Speaker, Harshman, Ottman, 61 present, 1 excused.
Thank you, Chief Clerk. Next, our prayer of the day will be led by Pastor Brian Rosignol, Douglas Assembly of God Church. Pastor, please.
How many of you are from a part of the state that needs some rain? It almost feels that way, doesn't it? And I know people in my area of the state, they're worried. They're kind of concerned about what the summer is going to look like. But it always brings me back to the word. God has not called us to worry. He's called us to pray. And so James chapter 5, verse 16, it says that the prayer of a righteous person accomplishes much. And then it goes on to talk about how Elijah prayed and it rained. And so my prayer today is that God would reign over our land, that God would refresh our land, and that even though as we're planning and preparing and we're dealing with the challenges and issues that come and we're being proactive about those things, how many know that God is in control? And so let's pray. Lord Jesus, I just thank you so much for being a God who's in control of all things. And God, I just pray right now that your fresh rain will come down upon this land. God, that your power, God, will move in our state. And God, I pray for each and every single one of these servants, God, these men and women who have volunteered, who have chosen to serve this state, who have sacrificed their time. They have come here to serve. Lord, I pray right now, God, your blessing upon them. I pray your wisdom upon them. And God, I pray your favor upon the people in which they represent. God, I pray, God, that your Holy Spirit will just move across this land. And God, that you will just refresh our land. We pray that the rain will fall. And God, we pray right now that you will bless Wyoming. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Play ball. By all means, play ball. All right, body, if we can, we'll start to make our way back to our desks, I trust. And we'll get the day underway. Journal Committee report.
Your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of March 4th, 2026 has been read and recommends it be approved. Representatives Posey and Jarvis.
Okay. Representative Brown, you have something for us, please?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Privilege of the floor.
Yes, you certainly may, sir. Please.
Thank you, members. I'd like to draw your attention to the West Gallery. Up in the West Gallery, we have with us today Pastor Tommy Miller of Faith Baptist Church here in Cheyenne. And Pastor Miller will be our pastor of the day tomorrow. So welcome him to the house.
Thank you, Pastor Miller, for being with us. We look forward to having you here opening us in prayer tomorrow, sounds like. So that'll be awesome. Thank you for being here today. All right, Representative Pendergraph is trying to help Representative Filer do something maybe. I'm not sure. Okay, Representative Filer, do you have something for us?
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, can I have a quick privilege?
You certainly may.
All right, folks, I got an amazing joke. I mean, I wanted a standing ovation on this one. All right, Mr. Speaker, what is invisible? It smells like bananas. Monkey breath.
You got one more day, yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen, our doctor of the day is Dr. Robert Monger, and our nurse of the day is Robin Cole. And so they will be with us, attending to us, and hopefully we will, as again, I will hopefully say that we have not needed their services terribly much so far this session. I know some of us have been battling some issues, but I think by and large, compared to what we dealt with last year, this has been actually quite a healthy group of people. So thank you guys for taking such good care of yourselves, and we appreciate these doctors and nurses being here to help us. So thank you for their willingness to support us. We have a special event coming, but I was going to want to read something for you guys here this morning, kind of give you a little bit of an idea of kind of what this is going to look like going forward now, as far as the rest of the days of the session and kind of what the expectation and in discussion with the Senate in an effort to be able to manage legislation as it's coming. We're going to have a 3-day window here. So here, I'll just give you kind of what they typed up for me as my direction this morning to kind of help us better understand. And we'll take some questions if we can, if you have any. With the legislature recessing, which we will go through tomorrow, depending on, now this, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you not seen it, you kind of saw it somewhat last year. You're going to see it more this year. It's going to kind of stop and start now. So we're going to finish our third reading, and then we're going to be joint conferences and concurrences and things like that. We'll rise, wait for things to come from the other body. And so it's going to be kind of slow for today and tomorrow. But then because of the timeline of passing legislation, we're going to allow the 3 days, which when the governor gets it, it's time stamped. And then Saturday counts on his 3 days. So we're not going to need to be here for a couple of days to allow him that time for that 72 hours while we are in session to be able to come back in to if there would be potentially any veto overrides. So with that in mind, with the legislature recessing, we will recess until Wednesday, March the 11th. The legislators will continue to receive your normal pay of salary and per diem for Monday, March the 9th, and Tuesday, March the 10th. If you travel home over the weekend, you'll need to sign the travel book in front of the office in order to receive pay for mileage. In addition to that, we will need at least 42 members of this body to be here on Wednesday for veto overrides. We must have 2/3. If you're not here, it's a no vote. That's what it boils down to. But we would have to have 42 members here for veto overrides if there would be any. We've reserved time in our schedule. We have the days, but you would not have to return here until Wednesday. So if you wanted to go home Friday, my ask of you is, and the other chamber is going to have to operate the same way, is that you would be back here Wednesday morning. And then we would come in And then we would be here, and it's going to be a day of just basically kind of hanging out, waiting for the determinations from the governor. And then this body and the other body down the hall to the west of us will act on those overrides. And then we will operate that. And then at the end of that time, when all the legislation that we've passed and has been before the governor, then we will sign and die at that point, and we will be done. So you have some extra days, but because of the fact that we are still in session, you will get paid for those days. So just all of that to help you guys try to be able to plan your weekend and kind of what you're going to want to do. But we're doing this, ladies and gentlemen, because last year when we leave here, the governor has 15 days to be able to determine whether or not he's going to veto a particular piece of legislation. It is extremely difficult to try to assemble a legislature 2 weeks after to come in, and if there's any piece of legislation that we want to try to support and that we want to try to make sure that we have the votes here for a veto override to get them back here. So that's why we save those extra days, is just specifically for this. So what it does is it requires our governor to make the determinations on all these pieces of legislation in that 72-hour period, 3 days he has. He'll have Saturday, well, we timestamp it. When it leaves here, it's timestamped and sent to the governor's office and the clock begins. Sunday does not play into that. So it'll be Saturday, he will have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we have the ability to override those vetoes, and then we're done. And so that's the plan. That's the way we've got it set up right now, and I wanted all of you guys to know that so that you had an idea of what you were going to be looking at, and you can make determinations based on that. If you have questions and you concerns or wondering what's going to go on, please ask. But that's the plan right now at this point going forward. Now we're going to start, and we got some third reading today, but we're going to start to see, I've got a pile of enrolled acts here. We're going to start to see concurrences come back, or, joint conference committees, and we'll have some of that going through, but we're going to be kind of slow here for a couple of days. But just so you know, want all of you on the same page together. If you have questions, holler at me, or you can ask Director Obricht, and we'll make sure that you get your questions answered. But just to reread this so you all know, with the legislature recessing until Wednesday, March the 11th, the legislators will continue to receive your pay, salary per diem on Monday, March the 9th, and Tuesday, March the 10th. And if you travel home, please make sure that you let the LSO staff know. I'll reiterate that again. If you've gone home, you've got to go into the LSO office and sign in the book and make sure to let them know what weekends you went home. So, all right, if that's as clear as mud, I will try to work with you on it. Otherwise, we will continue on. We have a special event here for our high school intern recognition. And so we will discuss, get back to that. All right. Members of the House, each year the Wyoming Legislature sponsors the Legislative Internship Program, providing high school and college students with a unique insight into the legislative branch of government and its crucial role in creating public policy. Both the high school and college interns will complete their internships on Friday. We want to acknowledge them for their hard work. And so, if we have some of the interns, are there the interns going to be here? We're looking for them. So, the assistant chief clerk is gathering interns. So maybe we'll wait a little bit on this, but they were supposed to be here for that announcement at this point. See some movement out there, but oh, really? That's fine. We can wait till the afternoon if they're going to come or whatever, but we had it on the agenda for this time of the day. So, all right. Okay. All right. Well, let's wait a little bit on them then, but that will be coming. It's just for all of our information. Let's see. What about here's the other one. Okay, so we've got another special event. We're going to be coming with the orchestra, but they're supposed to be at the Senate first, and then they'll come this way, but they have not started yet in the Senate. So we'll just have to kind of hang fire. So with that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go to enrolled acts, and we'll start getting through some of the business of the day. And then as those things come up to fruition, we will stop and we will take care of those at that time. All right, first we are at that order of business of signing of enrolled acts. First enrolled act for our considerations, and House Enrolled Act number 21. Reading clerk.
House Enrolled Act number 21 being original House Bill 122. An act relating to the Federal Rural Health Transformation Program funds, establishing the Wyoming Rural Health Transformation Program, creating an advisory committee, creating a perpetuity fund, authorizing investments as specified, creating an expenditure account, continuously appropriating and annually acquiring distribution, providing for governance, fiscal controls, accountability, and reporting requirements, authorizing expenditures, initiatives, grants, and awards, providing for deposits and appropriations, requiring rulemaking, directing studies, and providing for an effective date being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign House Enrolled Act number 21, having been original House Bill 122. I have so signed. Next enrolled act for our consideration, Enrolled Act number 22.
House Enrolled Act number 22 being original House Bill 3. An act relating to public health and safety, providing legislative findings, prohibiting the state and specified governmental entities from adopting any law, rule, or policy that targets pregnancy centers for oversight or regulation based on the center's stance against abortion, providing definitions, providing penalties, making conforming amendments, and providing for an effective date being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign House Enrolled Act number 22, having been original House Bill 3. I have so signed. All right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for that. And next order of business is we will go on to messages from the Senate. None. Okay, so that's going to change a little bit here after a bit, I'm sure. Okay, bills on third reading and final passage. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, do our consent list, please. Are you kidding? Oh, you took 39 off. Okay, here, we can do that.
Mr. Speaker, a lot of things going on this morning. So I move the third reading consent list consisting of the following Senate files: Senate File 54, 55, 85, 121, and 123.
It shows that it's on here. All right,
Okay.
members,
Mr.
go ahead,
Speaker,
Majority Leader.
we'd like to add to that consent list Senate Joint Resolution 9.
Any members? Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to remove Senate File 123.
123 removed. Okay, any others? Seeing no one. All right, members, you're going to be voting on consent of Senate File 54, 55, 85, 121, and Senate Joint Resolution number 9. Whenever the chief clerk is ready. Oh, so yeah, we got to get the reading clerk first. And I got to get to my place here. Reading clerk, please.
Senate File 54, sponsored by Senator Rothfuss, state banks and SPDI conversions, an act relating to banks, banking, and finance being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 55, sponsored by Senator Rothfuss, special purpose depository institutions amendments, an act relating to banks, banking, and finance being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 85, sponsored by Senator Nethercott, Raven Act, an act relating to the Division of Criminal Investigation being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 121, sponsored by Senator Dockstader, Wyoming Pharmacy Act amendments, an act relating to the Wyoming Pharmacy Act being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate Joint Resolution 9, sponsored by Senator Barlow, keeping public lands protected and decisions local, A joint resolution requesting Congress to recognize the protection of Wyoming's freedom of access to public lands to allow responsible development of resources, recreation, agriculture, hunting, fishing, trapping, and conservation under multiple use frameworks to protect local participation in land management decisions and to keep public lands available to the people of Wyoming, being enacted by the Legislature of the State of Wyoming.
Having been read three separate times, the question is, shall these bills pass the House? Chief Clerk will please call the roll.
Allemand, Andrew, Angelos, Banks, Bear, Brady, Bratton, Brown Gary, Brown Landon, Byron, Campbell Elisa, Campbell Kevin, Chestick, Clouston, Connolly, Davis, Erickson, Feiler, Bornstrom, Geringer, Guggenmoss, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Heft, Jarvis, Johnson, Kelly, excused, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson JT, Lawley, Lean, Locke, Lucas, McCann, Nicholas, Ottman, Pendergraft, Posey, Provenza, Riggins, Rodriguez-Williams, Schmid, Sherwood, Singh, Smith, Storer, Strock, Stivar, Tarver, Thayer, Washut, Wasserberger, Webb, Weber, Worf, Williams, Winter, Wiley, Yin. Mr. Speaker, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 61 aye, 1 excused. As for Senate File 54, are there any changes? Lean, aye to no. Brown Gary, aye to no. Lucas, aye to no. Smith, aye to no. Strock, aye to no. Johnson, aye to no. Bear, aye to no. Pendergraft, aye to no. Bratton, aye to no. Allemand, aye to no. Locke, aye to no. Knapp, aye to no. Winter, aye to no. Rodriguez-Williams, aye to no. Guggenmoss, aye to no. Ottman, aye to no. Heft, aye to no. Weber, aye to no. McCann, aye to no. Schmid, aye to no. Webb, aye to no. Brady, aye to no. Heiner, aye to no. Further changes? Mr. Speaker, aye to no. Further changes? Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 37 aye, 24 no, 1 excused. As for Senate File 55, are there any changes? Smith, aye to no. Brown Gary, aye to no. Lucas, aye to no. Strock, aye to no. Angelos, aye to no. Johnson, aye to no. Lean, aye to no. Haroldson, aye to no. Bear, aye to no. Pendergraft, aye to no. Bratton, aye to no. Allemand, aye to no. Winter, aye to no. Guggenmoss, aye to no. Heft, aye to no. Ottman, aye to no. Rodriguez-Williams, aye to no. Weber, aye to no. McCann, aye to no. Webb, aye to no. Schmid, aye to no. Brady, aye to no. Heiner, aye to no. Knapp, aye to no. Mr. Speaker, aye to no. Further changes? Further changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 36 aye, 25 no, 1 excused. As for Senate File 85, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 61 aye, 1 excused. As for Senate File 121, are there any changes? Smith, aye to no. Brown Gary, aye to no. Strock, aye to no. Haroldson, aye to no. Singh, aye to no. Stivar, aye to no. Knapp, aye to no. Pendergraft, aye to no. Campbell Kevin, aye to no. Bear, aye to no. Bratton, aye to no. Allemand, aye to no. Locke, aye to no. Winter, aye to no. Heft, aye to no. Weber, aye to no. McCann, aye to no. Schmid, aye to no. Brady, aye to no. Lean, aye to no. Johnson, aye to no. Further changes? Further changes? Singh, no to aye. Singh, confirm. Closing vote. Vote closed. 41 aye, 20 no, 1 excused. As for Senate Joint 9, are there any changes? Wasserberger, aye to no. Smith, aye to no. Brown Gary, aye to no. Further changes? Haroldson, aye to no. Strock, aye to no. Allemand, aye to no. Rodriguez Williams, aye to no. Further changes? Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 54 aye, 7 no, 1 excused.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate Files 54, 55, 85, 121, and Senate Joint Resolution Number 9 has passed the House. Moving on to third reading regular, first bill for our consideration or Senate file for our consideration, Senate File 39. Reading clerk.
Senate File 39, sponsored by Senator Crago. Long-term homeowners tax exemption sunset repeal. An act relating to taxation being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We have amendments. Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move amendment number 1, third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 30 or to Senate File 39. And I just wanted to let this body know that basically this bill is the one that it's a duplicate of the bill you basically passed last night. So it's the long-term homeowner removing the sunset date. And you recall, we all just went through a JCC on that, and I haven't heard the results of the JCC on the other end, but the long and the short of it is they're basically duplications of the bill. So there's really no point for us to vote aye on this. I asked for no vote on the bill. And at this moment, I will withdraw this amendment bill, but I'd recommend a no vote. We just will kill this and not force a JCC. In fact, I asked for mercy. Stuck on that. Thank you for your.
Without objection from the body, the amendment has been withdrawn. Thank you, Representative Locke. There should, I do believe I just went rocketing by a representative that wanted to speak on that particular deal. But it's, what's that? Yep. The discussion? Yeah, it is, you can discuss it. He did withdraw it. Yep, it's done. So, yep, all right, that's done. So he did withdraw it completely, and so, yeah. All right, members, you're voting on Senate File 39, having been read 3 separate times. The question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk will please call the roll.
Allemande? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Brady? Bratton? Brown Gary? Brown Landon? Byron? Campbell Elisa? Campbell Kevin? Chestick? Clouston? Connolly? Davis? Erickson? Filer? Bornstrom? Geringer? Guggenmoss? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Heft? Jarvis? Johnson? Kelly, excused. Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Lean? Locke? Lucas? McCann? Nicholas? Ottman? Pendergraft? Posey? Provenza? Riggins? Rodriguez Williams? Schmid? Sherwood? Singh? Smith? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Thayer? Washut? Wasserberger? Repeat? Webb? Weber? Wharf? Williams? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Mr. Speaker, are there any changes? Allemande, aye. To no. Lawley, aye. To no. Geringer, no. To aye. Locke, no. To aye. Brady? Brady, aye. Riggins, no. To aye. Further changes? Further changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 23 aye, 38 no, 1 excused.
Senate File 39, having failed to receive the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 39 has failed to pass the House. Next Senate file for our consideration, number 99, reading clerk.
Senate File 99, sponsored by Senator Cooper. Prescriptive easements for electricity delivery and act relating to property conveyances and security transactions being enacted by the Legislature of the State of Wyoming.
We have amendments. Representative Bratton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move I move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 99. Ask for your favorable consideration.
Perfect.
And I will explain the amendment. So on this bill, if you go to the last page, page 7, what the amendment does is there is an exception to this bill. Basically what the bill does is if you have your property and you have your neighbor's property, and if there has been an electric line going through your property for 25 years, but there's been no official easement, then the bill says that your neighbor who's getting that electric should still get their electric. I'm fine with that. But what this, except when needed to serve a reasonable expansion of use for neighboring or local land uses, and then except industrial and manufacturing related increases in wattage does, it says if your neighbor sells to a developer and that developer puts 50 houses on it, the electric line that goes through your front yard, they can now supersize that. That's what this last exception does. If it is permitted by those local authorities who have to do with land use. The second part of this exception, except industrial and manufacturing related increases in wattage, if your neighbor sells to somebody and they put a data center on that, and now they need to increase the wattage that is going through that little line in your front yard, they can also do that. So what my amendment does is puts a period after the estate and before the except on page 7, line 15, so that if there's historic use, that's fine. If you have historic use going, to your neighbor, then they get that. But they can't sell to somebody and then they get to put a 60-foot tower where you just had a little telephone pole, couple telephone poles with, a line going over it, or dig through your front yard. This has happened in the county where I live, where all of a sudden there's a 60-foot tower with a blinking light on top of it. And it's a huge problem. It's why I literally caught this before my first cup of coffee this morning, spoke to a couple different lawyers, and they agreed that this exception, these two exceptions at the end could absolutely be argued to be able to do that. Thank you.
Discussion on the amendment. Representative Pendergraph, your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for the amendment. As the previous speaker said, we had exactly this situation happen in our county. So somebody that lived in their home with a beautiful view of the mountains. They've been there probably 25 years. The covenant originally said that any utility lines must be buried. And all of a sudden there's an easement within 50 feet of their home. Big, high power tension line right between them and the mountain, right over the top of that. Think of the property devaluation through no fault of their own, something that they had spent their life building and putting up, and now all of a sudden there's there. The other reason is if you look at the language that we're looking to strike, there is the word reasonable in there. Well, who gets to decide what's reasonable? On and for the amendment.
Representative Lawley, for your first time, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill was heard in the Minerals Committee, and we had testimony on it, quite a bit of testimony on it. And the interesting thing about this kind of bill is it was worked on. It kind of was like our wildfire mitigation bill and others. So we've gotten these groups together, and we've asked them to work out among themselves some of their differences. And this provision, I've been told, was by the landowners. This is something they wanted. And I'll just say this, that the situation described a moment ago, I am not sure really falls under what this bill is doing. I would need a lot more information on that. But we had these interests working together because the situation is prescriptive easements exist, but they were done so many years ago that these were done on handshakes. And one of the things that Bill's trying to do is kind of formalize those so landowners have notice of what the prescriptive easement is. And this is also an easement that isn't mutual. So it's actually, these were designed to do little disruption to the owner of the property. So this is just a process of trying to get that from the handshake that happened with the landowner 50 years ago to something that's more documented so that folks can have more notice actually when they buy a piece of property. That's what this is doing. And again, landowners asked for this particular provision, and I just think it's important to remember that in the process. And then when we come in with someone, I appreciate people reading the bill. I think that's really important and seeking to understand it. But the facts surrounding the bill and why the provisions were put in is also extremely important. So the committee did a lot of good work on this. We carried it over another day. And again, many of the folks that are a part of these landowner groups also testify their support for the bill as it is. So this is a kind of a time where we get to third reading and people have some new and different untested ideas, no public testimony to support what's being said. And I just ask you to vote no on this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Williams, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you all.
on and against the amendment. Hopefully I can give a little clarity to the two sentences, two partial sentences that are in question. Like we just heard, that absolutely is for and has been requested by landowners. If you look at the first part of the amendment, except when needed to serve a reasonable expansion of use for neighboring or local land uses. So this means that nothing in this section shall be construed to expand the electric utilities use, except when needed to serve a reasonable expansion. So if I or my neighbor need to upgrade a line for a stock water well or for a new house on our property, this is included in the bill, asked for by the landowners. That's where I believe the reasonable expansion that we heard about comes in. That is the people who live there. It is their, they are involved in that conversation. The second part of that sentence, except industrial and manufacturing related increases in wattage. So if a pump station or a industrial data center, whatever, is built next door, they cannot come across that same easement with an upgraded line. They cannot bring three-phase across there to that new industry without starting over on the easement. The prescriptive easement does not apply to that. And asked for by the landowners, agreed to by agriculture groups, on and against the amendment.
Representative Chestick, for your first time, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure if I'm for or against this amendment because I don't understand the language that's being removed. This is maybe a technical legal writing question, but it appears to be ambiguous to me. We have two exceptions separated by commas. Is the second one an exception to the previous exception? Or does the last exception modify the previous exception? Or does it modify the whole paragraph? And you get opposite results depending on how you interpret that last exception. The language here is very ambiguous. I'm confused by it. I don't know if that means I should vote for or against the amendment because I just want to raise the question with the body. This language is very ambiguous.
Representative Larson, JT, for your first time, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment. Again, we've heard this in minerals. There's been a working group that has worked on this for quite a long time to come to an agreement. So I encourage you to vote no, because this has been a collaborative process to get to this point.
Representative Larson Lloyd, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I read this, I think the amendment actually does more harm to the concern that's being brought up by the bringer of the amendment because it gives the exception that you can't do it if it's industrial or whatever. Now we delete all of that. And so I think to protect from circumstances or instances happening that we heard about, you'd want to leave that language in place. So I think to protect any type of mischief or unintended expansion happening, we'd want to leave the language as is and vote no on the amendment.
Any other representatives? Representative Tarver, for your first time, sir.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I would also encourage you to vote no on this. This could have downstream effects, especially as a landowner. If I wanted to expand, as our prior representative spoke, water well, I want to build a house for my children, anything. I think we better think long and hard about this one. And I do believe the way it reads to me, this does keep the industrial out of being able to go past me or through me to build an industrial zone, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, I would highly recommend a no vote on this.
Any other representatives for their first time on the amendment? Any others? Seeing none. Second time on the amendment? Seeing no. Representative Pendergraph, second time, sir, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess the difficulty for me is in the two uses of the word except when needed to serve a reasonable expansion. I still, whenever I see the word reasonable in there, I panic who gets to decide what that is. And I definitely get the other view where it's keeping industrial out. But does the second except, is it a double negative or does it apply from the beginning? The language here is completely unclear and wide open. And unless the language is tightened up, frankly, I wish I'd have caught this earlier and maybe we could have offered an alternative set of language. I just saw it this morning. I'm on and for the amendment.
Any other members, second time? Representative Lawley for your second.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thought I would speak from this position right now. Again, still strongly against the amendment. And it's important to understand that the landowners, along with other stakeholders, developed this language, and the language does what they want it to do. And you've heard that from several different folks in this body who are landowners. So again, this amendment does a lot of harm. And let's leave the bill the way that was worked on, and it was worked through committee. And we made a few changes there in coordination with those folks. So again, please resist this amendment. Thanks.
Representative Chestick for your second time, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On reflection, I think the smart thing to do here, I think we all understand that there's a lot of problems with this language. It's very confusing. And maybe the smart thing to do is to pass the amendment. That way we have a discrepancy between our bill and that in the Senate, and this language issue can then get worked out in a conference committee. So I would urge an aye vote on the amendment.
Any other members for the second time? We've got Williams, Larson, JT, and Lloyd, and Tarver can speak a second time. Seeing no one rushing to the microphones, back to the bringer. Representative Bratton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think we all want to protect our landowners. So I'm going to stand by, as I was advised, on and for the amendment.
Members, you're voting on third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 99. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. Amendment is not division being called. All those in favor, please stand. Everybody up that wants to be up. We've had about 4 folks kind of decide, so we're good. A little bit. 1. Yep. Okay. May be seated. All those opposed, please stand. All right, you may be seated. The amendment has not been adopted. 30 to 31. All right, we've got one more amendment coming to this particular piece of legislation, so we'll hang fire here briefly while we wait for that amendment to show up. So I'd asked Representative Filer to get up and say something really catty and interesting, but he only gets one of those a day, so we can't do that. And we're gonna need more in the next couple of days as we work through the process, so we're gonna want to save some of this, don't want to waste all of our powder on right now, so. Representative Strzok's got a smile on her face.
Oh, I just thought, thank you.
Maybe an
Speaker.
update on the grandkids?
Yeah, I would give you an update. The firstborn, Olivia, has a little tiny oxygen mask on her. She's somewhat able to breathe on her own. Little Sophia still is intubated. So, but they're doing well. And my son will head down tomorrow and my daughter to go see the babies. I was going to, but with this cold, my daughter said, "You can't, Mom." So she said, "Yeah, I had to stay." So after session, I was going to head down there, but the babies won't know I'm there or not. So anyway, then Sam's going to go home for a couple days to gather what she may need and have her own vehicle. And then go back down with the babies. But they're all doing well. So thank you for the prayers.
Congratulations, Grandma. Best of that family. Representative. Okay. Representative Geringer, are you the amendment bringer or you got something to go?
I've got an amendment.
Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's online, so we can go to third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 99. Representative Geringer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 99 and ask for your favorable consideration. So I too shared the concern of the good attorney over the hill, law professor. The second exception was a little bit confusing. And so just to clear that up a little bit, to delete except and insert such exception shall not include, so that the last part of that line would read, except when needed to serve a reasonable expansion of use for neighboring or local land uses, such exception shall not include industrial and manufacturing related increases in wattage. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any members for the first time on the amendment? Representative Haroldson, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe this is a clarification. I believe we were protected before. And then the concern is, could a data center go at the end of an old easement? And the reality is no, I don't think we ever had that concern. Now, I think we need to back up and just talk about what the problem is we're fixing here. And the problem is, in my area has got a lot of this, the area that the good bringer of this amendment and I grew up in. We've got a whole bunch of power lines in our area that were put in back on a handshake. And now we're at a point of needing to go in and update this infrastructure, and we go to look for an easement. Well, there is no easement. And so we've got this main line going down a farm to market road that's serving large industry, or not large industry, but large amounts of residential properties and farms and ranches, that all of a sudden there's no easement. And we need to have that conversation. This gives that saying, hey, you know what, that handshake, we now have an easement down this line. The concern is, well, what happens if we get to the end of that line and say that farmer next to me takes one of their pivots and turns it into residential properties, 2-acre parcels? Well, they could continue to use that easement and they may have to go and increase that load. That's what we're talking about here. Now, if a data center wants to buy the field next to you, then it goes back to the whole entire process, and they're going to have to find themselves an easement, and they're going to have to do the whole process with you. So what this does is it clarifies that language, but that language was always there to protect from commercial load going into those areas. And so I just want to make it clear at the end of this, there wasn't a fear. I don't feel that there was ever a fear of the data center or the power plant or something like that moving in next to you. So I believe this is a good amendment. I'm on and for the amendment, and I believe that we need to be careful at this point that we don't derail this bill by putting something in there that has unintended consequences.
Thank you, Speaker Pro Tem. Representative Webb, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is, forget the data center, forget maybe even a huge development. What happens when there was no handshake, an electrical company put a line across the private property owner's land to provide service for a house or houses next door.
Representative Pendergraft, for your first time, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for the amendment, I think this takes care of our concern. And in this case, if they bring a large power that, for example, they say they can't bury it or it's cost prohibitive to bury it, it still has to go through the established process. That works. So in short, on and for the amendment.
Any other Representative Chestick, for your first time, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and in favor of this amendment. I think it does clear up the problem.
Any others? Representative Larson, JT.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In committee, we'd never heard testimony that there were lines that were put down without the owner's verification or a handshake deal or anything like that. All we heard was that there were handshake deals made to serve them and their neighbors, and this is just making sure that they have the right paperwork in place. So I encourage you to vote aye on the amendment and aye on the bill.
Representative Larson Lloyd, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And one of the questions of concern about what if once that right of way or easement is established, the power company or a neighbor wanted to tap into that source and run, let's just say perpendicular to an adjoining property. There's within this right of way, there's an easement 30 foot on both sides of the pole. But once it gets out past that, they're going to have to negotiate an easement with that landowner or neighboring landowner. Either this new landowner or the utility would have to establish a right of way through the general normal means. It wouldn't allow them to go grab it.
Representative Thayer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just some clarification or an example of definition of manufacturing. So let's say we have a landowner at the end of the line who wants to put in a beef processing plant. So is that considered manufacturing? Manufacturing is a broad term, and I don't want to tie, I'm thinking outside the box, but I just don't want to tie hands of, ranching is a long history in our state. And, sometimes they have to do add value to their land to succeed. So I just want to make sure we're not tying the hands of one, what the definition of manufacturing is, and if that was an example.
Representative Wiley, your first time.
Just real quick, Mr. Speaker, thank you. Body, I understand the concern and stuff here, but if these people buy this land and actually want to go through the process and dot the T's cross the T's and dot the I's, they can self-generate. But I think we should be very careful and not get off into these rabbit holes right now and derail a good effort. And to a speaker before, if you have problems with that, that's why we have the courts. So I think we should on for this and on for the bill. Let's get it through and get it over the top.
Representative Lawley, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for the amendment, I appreciate the good bringer of the amendment. It brings some clarity again to the space, and I appreciate that you left intact the intent of what the landowners want and need. And I think that's the answer to the question. Thank you.
Any other members for their first time? Representative Bratton? Huh? You haven't gone yet? No. First time on the amendment. This is the new amendment. Representative Bratton, please, by all means.
Property rights are never a rabbit hole. They're very, very important. But thank you to the good representative, and I do support this amendment.
Any other members? First time on the amendment? Seeing none, back to second time on the amendment. Representative Harrelson, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So two things. One, when the good representative asked, what happens to the person who had a line brought across their property without their permission? That's intimate domain conversations. And those are things that we constantly have to worry about, that we make sure as as the government of this state, that we put in place protections for our landowners where they have the right to have those conversations, yes and no. What this is applying to is those handshake agreements from the past and what that looks like. Hey, you know what? Can we bring this line down the farm to market road? Yeah, you can run it across. I mean, his dad's property has some of those lines on it, the old Geringer place, right? And so these are the conversations that we're having. Was there ever an easement drawn up? Probably not. And in fact, no. Now all of a sudden we need to update. We got to pull those poles out because they're rotted off, or we need to update that service because it is not up to the amount of load that we're running down that now. And all of a sudden we're finding that we've got 10 different landowners and no easement through this property. This is a protection that we can then bring to saying, hey, you know what, that's been there. It's basically a grandfathered in type conversation. They can go and they can do that update. The section we're addressing right here is simply what happens when we need to go from maybe up to like a 3-phase. Is there a way that we can do that? Yes, there is, as long as it's not for that industrial upgrade. The second aspect is this, and a question I was asked offside. What happens if it's an abandoned line? So maybe you go into these communities where there's old abandoned power lines that haven't been used. Can they basically revive that old line bed? And the answer is absolutely not. If it isn't currently in use, this doesn't apply. This is only for what is our current service, so we don't have to bring our utilities back into that sector in place of if they were to lose a pole or needed to upgrade service, they're not having to go back to the drawing board square one. And if that were the case, all of a sudden we could have massive areas of blackout in our communities where no power is available because they can't get the easements to get them in. And so that's what this addresses. For the person who's had a property line brought across theirs without their permission, I'd love to hear those stories and those situations where that's actually taking place outside of the eminent domain statutes, because if that is, that's wrong and shouldn't be done by a utility.
Representative Webb for your first.
Thank you, and thank you for the explanation. It's not a rabbit hole. It happened to me. Private property rights are important, and I appreciate the representative from up north stating that. When I went to the company that provided the electricity, they told me, and this is basically a quote, "Sue us. We have an attorney, we'll win. We need to protect our private property rights."
Representative Thayer for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, on and for this bill, absolutely. I just wanted to make sure we're not missing, and I appreciate all the hard work working with the landowners. I just had that one question on manufacturing.
Any other members? I have Pendergraft, Chestick, both Larsons, JT and Lloyd, Wiley, Lawley, and Bratton. They speak on a second go round. Seeing no one going to the microphones. Got a major conference going on. Does somebody from that conference planning on heading? If not, moving ahead. Representative Geringer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to draw the body's attention back to the language of this amendment alone. The good Speaker Pro Tem addressed it initially. This is simply a technical correction to make sure that everybody is clear that this is not accepting the use of manufacturing and industrial uses. So this is specifically going to the intent of this portion to just clarify that industrial and manufacturing is not included. And so the discussion over what manufacturing includes really is back on the bill. This is just intended to help clarify so that we're not, there is no confusion over that. The other discussions about whether it's for residential housing developments and in manufacturing and whether or not it's a private property rights issue is back on the bill. So this is just the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Members, you're voting on Senate File 99's third reading amendment number 2. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. The amendment has been adopted. Okay, Senate File number 99 having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? The Chief Clerk will call the roll when she's good and ready here. You know, ladies and gentlemen, just to give you some idea, you don't see it from your angle but I get to sit back here and look down at what these ladies and gentlemen are doing. You wouldn't believe what they're trying to sort out up here right now. And when we get done and pass the motion, she's taken on about 4 other jobs, and she's trying to sort and organize and keep this thing running great. And it is, when she needs a couple seconds to get things going and ramp this thing up so she can do it, it's because it's not watching videos up here. These folks are working their rear ends off. So I hope all of you realize how hard these folks work in the job that they do. So please call the roll.
Ellerman, Andrew, Angelos, Banks, Bear, Brady, Bratton, Brown Gary, Brown Landon, Byron, Campbell Elisa, Campbell Kevin, Chestick, Clouston, Connolly, Davis, Erickson, Filer, Fornstrom, Geringer, Guggenmoss, Harrelson, Harshman, Heiner, Heft, Jarvis, Johnson, Kelly excused, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson JT, Lawley, Lean, Locke, Lucas, McCann, Nicholas, Ottman, Pendergraft, Posey, Provenza, Riggins, Rodriguez-Williams, Rodriguez-Williams, Schmid, Sherwood, Singh, Smith, Storer, Strock, Stivar, Tarver, Thayer, Washut, Wasserberger, Webb, Weber, Worf, Williams, Winter, Wiley, Yin. Mr. Speaker, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Brown, Gary, aye. To no. Guggenmoss, aye. To no. Further changes. Allemand, aye. To no. Further changes. Singh, aye. To no. Further changes. Further changes. Closing vote. Vote closed. 47 aye, 14 no, 1 excused.
Senate File 99, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 99 has passed the House. Next Senate file for our consideration is 101, reading clerk. Oh, that's right. We've got, all right, we're gonna pause this right here. We've got some folks. Let me find and give you their information, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. This morning, as you can see, we have a special performance by Laramie High School's Chamber Orchestra. The group will be playing 3 pieces. They are directed by Jennifer Lyford. Okay, Lyford. Fellow representatives, please help me welcome these talented students to the House.
Is it just a turn on, turn off? Okay, thank you.
Does it work? It does work. All right, good morning. Thank you so much for having us here today. I will say that the only reason we're late on your schedule is because of the Senate. So
Tell us something we don't know.
anyway, we are so grateful to be here and privileged to play for both the House and the Senate. This is my 7th year with this group performing, and it is such a wonderful opportunity for them. This is our chamber orchestra, which is our top orchestra at Laramie High School. We have 3 orchestras, and these students all auditioned to be in this group. They are freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and they are also Grace Scholars. They are involved in clubs, activities, sports, all the things. And I just a wonderful group of students to work with. We will play 3 pieces for you today. The first one is called Jambo, and in Swahili it means hello. This next piece is a little bit different tempo. It's a slower piece. It's Dvorak's Symphony No. 9 from the New World, the second movement, the Largo. It's one of the composer's most beloved, successful, and frequently performed compositions. The symphony, written during his first stay in the United States from 1892 to 1895, was completed in Spillville, Iowa in 1893. Dvorak, who had been invited to New York by Mrs. Thurber, wife of a wealthy New York merchant, was engaged as the first director of the National Conservatory of Music. Some believe the symphony to be a message back to his native Bohemia, expressing his love of and nostalgia for his homeland. During his stay in the United States, Dvorak had immersed himself in the music of African American and Native American cultures, and there is little doubt that the Largo movement was written in the style of some of the early plantation melodies with which he was familiar. Yet it also contains clear reminiscences of the harmonic and melodic warmth found in music of his birth country. So for those who are coming from afar across the state and are missing your home, you'll get to go back soon. This may bring some nostalgia to you. This is the Largo from the New World Symphony. All right, the last piece we will play is called Big Sky Country, which I believe we can also claim as well as Montana and other great Western states. It's by an American composer named Susan H. Day. Upon hearing the words Big Sky Country, one typically thinks of the Western states like us, Montana in particular, but I think we can claim it as much. This piece depicts any place where the sky is vast, the view expansive, and the setting natural. The elements of the music, with sweeping melodic phrases and a few key changes, suggest a spirit of adventure, freedom, the outdoors, and the beauty of the land, which I believe we have here in Wyoming. We hope you enjoy Big Sky Country.
So I hope it would be safe to say, without further ado, they're going to play another one. Well, we want to thank you guys for joining us today, one with your wonderful talent. And you know, the interesting part of this for me to watch you guys, and it was especially interesting to watch that. If any of you guys got a chance to see what this music and these talented young people did to inspire that young group of next musicians, because you guys are their inspiration. They're looking to you to see what they want to do and the things that they want to pursue. So you've done a wonderful job today of being a wonderful example of talent and grace and for those young people. And they were so engaged. I mean, they're like up against the glass watching you guys, and it was just fun. And the only difference between them and you guys out there in the audience is that you're just a little older, because you guys were fun to watch, because it was like, I even wrote it down. It was enchanted and it captured you guys. You could literally see members of this body just lay back, and I'm sure you musicians were watching this, lay back, close your eyes, and just let it go through you. You young ladies and young men are such a talented blessing to this state and to this chamber. We love what you do, and way to go. You know, Miss Lyford, fantastic. And so, and this was huge, and we really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule, and you were well worth the wait.
So important.
So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, what a wonderful opportunity. How blessed we are to be able to be here to have that kind of enjoyment and just realization of how amazing our young people are and the talents that they have. Representative Smith,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Privilege of the floor.
please, I'm sure you're going to introduce that little bunch of enchanted human beings, maybe? Are you?
Yes, Mr.
Okay,
Speaker.
get it done.
So in our South Gallery, the enchanted students that got to enjoy that wonderful performance came all the way from Southeast Elementary School. They're a bunch of fourth graders. And their wonderful teacher is Miss Tennille Gross. And Miss Tennille Gross and I used to serve on our local search and rescue group together. And she has wonderful dogs that are highly skilled and trained. And so I know if she trains her students just as half as good as her dogs, those students are well behaved and are learning great things. Welcome, Southeast Elementary School.
Welcome Southeast Elementary to the house. Thank you for being here. You picked a wonderful day to come down here. This couldn't have been any better. So, yes, Representative Brown, please.
Speaker, Mr. Speaker, privilege of the floor. So rumor has it that us clapping actually woke up the other body. When they were down there playing, it actually lulled them to sleep, and then us clapping actually woke them back up, Mr. Speaker. So, they'll actually do some work for us down there at the other end of the hall. But Mr. Speaker, actually what I wanted to step up here today is I have one of my favorite constituents. It's not very often you get somebody from 4.5 miles away to come down to the Capitol and see us. But we have with us former representative of this chamber of House District 8, Miss Lori Garrison, and she is actually still serving on the Board of Parole, but actually came down here to watch us in our last couple of days of debate. And it's her first time, Mr. Speaker, being back down here since leaving the session back in 2010. So thank you for coming down here, Lori.
I too have someone in the gallery that I have noticed is sitting up there quietly and overseeing us. I have, and if you would please welcome Commissioner from Weston County, Ed Wagner. He is down here from Newcastle, and so one of my county commissioners from my area. So welcome, Mr. Wagner. Thank you for coming down and being with us here in the house today. We also got to enjoy the blessing of the orchestra, so that's cool. So, all right. Any other announcements or privileges? We're good? What time of day are we getting into? I don't even know. Kind of lose track of things whenever you have that kind of oh no, tons of time. Tons. Back into it. Okay, next bill for our consideration will be Senate File 101.
Senate File 101, sponsored by Senator Beitman, Second Amendment Protection Act Amendments 3. An act relating to the protection of constitutional rights being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
Okay, Senate File 101, we have, let's see, first one we'll take up is Senate File 101, third reading amendment number 2. That will be Representative Clouston. Please proceed, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 101 and ask for your favorable consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, this has 2 parts to it. The first one I want to do is change interested party to aggrieved party. So, an interested party has not actually suffered any direct harm. What this would do is make it so that those people that are actually involved in the situation would be the ones involved. So this would limit some of the frivolous lawsuits, some of the outside influences in our state. The second part of it would be, again, dealing with a party who does not prevail in an action brought under this section may be responsible for paying all costs and fees incurred by the defendant in defending the action. So again, just trying to protect our Wyoming citizens that are actually involved. And again, trying to keep out any frivolous lawsuits. So I ask for your support on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative, speak on it for the first time. Representative Wharf, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to this bill. The language that's in Senate File 101 is the language that was provided us by the LSO. And I think it actually does what we want it to do. I think it does stop it to where it's only those parties that are interested. And the way I understand that is if you kick in my door, I can get my damages fixed. But if I'm renting a unit and you kick in that door, the house doesn't belong to me. But if I was to prevail, the homeowner could get that door fixed. So this just allows those parties that were involved, interested party to me is a better language. So I would ask you to resist this and vote no on this amendment, aye on the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any other members for their first time on the amendment? Representative Washut, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and in favor of the amendment. One of the issues that we're facing here is this issue of, as I read it, the way I read it, the ambiguity of it all. That's a big issue with this bill, and this amendment's trying to make that a little more clear. And I think it does that. It's just irresponsible to pass legislation that is ambiguous. It does no good service to anyone other than people are going to end up litigating it years down the road. So on and for the amendment.
Any other members for their first time on the amendment? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, speaking for myself, sometimes when we attach the Second Amendment to a piece of legislation, I'm not as motivated to make it better as I should. And it'll skate through both houses. No, passing the buck on to somebody else to make that hard call on a bill that's centered around an amendment that we all love. And so I'm on in support of this amendment. I do believe it makes this bill better. I'm not certain it does all that's needed to protect those that protect us, but I'm on and for this amendment.
Any other members for their first time on the amendment? Seeing none, second time on the amendment? Second time. Representative Wharf, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I probably should have said this last time, but I want to remind the body that this is the resurrected version of a bill last year that we passed out of this body with tremendous support. This is something that we've all seen before and we've supported it in the past. I would urge you to resist this amendment, pass the bill. Thank you.
Any other members for the second time? Representative Williams for your second time? Okay. Back to the bringer, Representative Clausen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a resurrected bill from last year that was then vetoed. So trying to avoid that situation. Article 3 of the U.S. Constitution says courts require standing. To sue in a federal court, a plaintiff must generally show injury in fact, causation, and redressability. Aggregated parties meet this test. Interested parties do not. So if we're going to try to make this a better bill and pass it so it can stand up in court, I think we need these amendments. If not, we can pass it and it's going to go to court and we probably know how that's going to end. So trying to make this a better bill and give it a chance down the line. I ask for your support. Thank you.
Members, you're voting on Third reading amendment number 2 to Senate file number 101. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. Division. Chairs in doubt, please stand if you're in support. Okay, you may be seated. It's going to be very close. All those opposed, please stand. All right, you may be seated. That amendment has not been adopted on a vote of 29 to 29. Okay, next amendment for our consideration, reading amendment number 3 to House, third reading amendment number 3 to House Bill 101. Representative Washut, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 3 to House Senate File 101 and ask your favorable consideration. You may have to hit refresh. Pop this one up. So what this amendment does is it reinserts stricken language of unconstitutional. That's the purpose. You know, the purported purpose of this bill is to protect the people of Wyoming from unconstitutional actions by peace officers. Why would we take that word out? If it just, trying to think how best to say this, it does a disservice to our law enforcement personnel if we say you're going to be subjected to the conditions of this bill, even though you don't know whether or not the actions you're engaged in are going to be determined to be constitutional or unconstitutional at some point in the future. They can only act on what they know today. So if we restrict this language in this bill to only those acts that are unconstitutional, then our peace officers have been given fair notice. Don't do this. There's a reason we call these peace officers sworn officers, because they take the same oath as our military personnel. So all of you veterans in the room who know how solemn that oath is, who know how important it is when you raise your hand and swear to protect and defend the Constitution. That's what our peace officers do. That's what our peace officers do. And so if we ask them to not violate the Constitution, they're 100% on board. If we tell them, don't do something that might be, if somebody down the road somewhere determines it may be unconstitutional, that is so ambiguous, it's impossible for them to comply under all circumstances. It leaves them wondering, is this act, is this rule, is this law going to be ruled constitutional at some time in the future? Otherwise, you're just banning them from doing any of these actions, even though they may be perfectly constitutional. I think it's a wise choice to reinsert that one critically important word in this bill. Please vote aye.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Harrelson, your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on and against this amendment, I want to explain a couple of reasons why. First of all, the question we have to ask is what's constitutional? I think we all have very heavy opinions of what that is. But there's, as we've seen in this country, the term constitutional is very liquid. Well, bump stocks, the elimination of bump stocks, is that constitutional? What about AR-15s or what they would call black guns? Is that constitutional? I mean, let's ask the question, right? Well, we have the right to bear arms. I don't see anywhere in the Constitution says that we have the right to have those. And that's what we've heard as excuses as they've seen different states and different places try ban them. What happens if a federal ban comes down on a certain type of firearm and there is a call to go and to round up those firearms? Well, what happens whenever we have someone that says, well, it didn't say no guns, so I think it's still constitutional. As it currently sits, this basically says no weapons or no federal regulations can be enforced by Wyoming law enforcement when it comes to firearms. So if the federal government says bump stocks are illegal, you need to go collect them all, a sheriff goes, honestly, our laws are state that we can't. You guys can come and do your own federal laws here, but you're not going to do them with our crew. And so if we put the constitutional word in there, we open this up even further. And I think you're going to hear in just a moment from another speaker about how this actually got us also this same legislation into some court concerns because of this word being in there and what that brings. And so I believe that the moment we put constitutional in there, as much as I'm 100% behind constitutional, in this case, that is not actually doing what we hope it would do.
Representative Baer, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and opposed to the amendment, the Show Me State had a similar bill that was struck down, and this is the reason, because it had this word in it, and it was basically saying that because of the supremacy clause, we can't determine what's constitutional and unconstitutional in the U.S. Constitution at our level. That has to be determined by a federal court. So by putting that word into the bill and asking our law enforcement to make those determinations has been determined to be unconstitutional. So with the word gone, then we can make these determinations. So on and opposed to the amendment.
Representative Pendergraft, your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too took that oath several times, and I take it very seriously. We are all very familiar with the U.S. Constitution and how that reads. I just want to remind you that the state says the right of citizens to bear arms in defense of themselves and of the state shall not be denied, period. If we have laws that deny people in various circumstances the right to defend themselves and the state, one could very easily make the argument that those laws are unconstitutional. That puts a police officer, a sheriff's deputy, in quite a quandary, and I understand that situation because they are bound to uphold the law. And if that law happens to be unconstitutional, now they've got that friction. So when we put that word constitutional in there, it makes the job of policing impossible, in my view. So against the amendment.
Any other members for their first time? Representative Wiley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sitting here and I'm listening to this discussion and this debate, and I've stood with this body several times on the Second Amendment issue, and I've stood strong with it. But I can also tell you, I'm very involved, and I come from a community of law and order, and I believe that this piece of legislation is having trouble balancing the two, and to protect our folks that bring this law and order. And, you know, they make several sacrifices already. It's always a person's worst day that they're dealing with. You know, holidays, long nights. My wife is a law enforcement officer. Sometimes it feels like a ship in the night, right? You pass each other. Give them a kiss, hope they come back, say, love you, be safe. But at the same time, I believe, and I'm trying to get behind this legislation, but I don't know if I can. And I appreciate these amendments being brought today because we're trying to do something here to where the body can get together and support this thing. I don't know how I'm going to vote on the constitutionality of this, if we should have it in there or not. I know when you remove the sideboards and a law enforcement officer is trying to apply this in the field, they follow statute to the T, to the language of it. So if we don't have that protection there with those folks that are dealing with everybody's worst day in almost impossible situations, I don't know if I can support the legislation itself, or if it gets moved from this body to downstairs and then back up and it has a little red line through it. I don't know if I can overturn that. So vote your conscience, but this is a big lift here, folks.
Representative Wharf, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will remind the body that, you know, what we're talking about goes in the Green Book. So we're talking about legalese. And the one problem with having unconstitutional in this bill, who is it that determines constitutionality? Okay. That's determined by our courts, which means in the event that an order is ever given to seize firearms, ammunition, or accessories, if this were to be adopted, it would say that they could come in and disarm you. They could take all those things or parts of them and leave you to go through the court process, the legal process, and have the courts determine that their actions were unconstitutional. Now, I was criticized because I said that when these guns are seized, they go into a black hole. And I want to make it absolutely clear because it was a misquote. I said Hurricane Katrina, which was in Louisiana, that's where we know guns were in fact confiscated by law enforcement. And people were doing crazy things. They were shooting at helicopters. They were doing crazy things. But when those guns were confiscated, when everything settled, nobody knew where the guns were. And therein lies the problem. Once seized, you have no idea what's going to happen to your firearms, your accessories, or your ammunition until the courts resolved whether or not that was an unconstitutional act. Now, our law enforcement guys every day have to face decisions. This isn't that hard. This bill says one thing. It's doing two things, I should say. I'll remind the body. It adds a civil penalty where if you are harmed, you can bring lawsuit rather than counting on your county attorney to sue your county sheriff or your police chiefs. The second thing it does is it ensures that our law enforcement, if an order is ever given federally to come seize firearms, ammunition, or accessories, our law enforcement can't help them. That's all this bill says. All the other things, all the minutia that you're hearing, the minutia, it is pure BS. We have dealt with this long, but in fairness of time, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to ask that you resist this amendment. So no on the amendment, aye on the bill.
Any other members for their first time? Representative Riggins, for your first time, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I missed much of this argument in the previous session. So I look, and I'm reading legislation. I see things in this that isn't in ordinary legislation. For example, when it comes to criminal penalties, there's always some limitation, not more than, or not greater than, or so many years of penalties and so much on the fine. That is different in this type of legislation. And sometimes I was reading that and I wonder, this is a solution looking for a problem. And my good friend over here, when he mentioned only that person that was aggrieved would be on this suit, what we just talked about. If I'm reading a magazine, I mean, I could be completely incorrect about this, but if I'm reading a magazine, I'm interested in this, I could be a party to the suit. Or I could, I can always file an amicus brief. I could do all kinds of stuff to support the defendant in any situation. I could also be a contributor to their defense. And there's also in all these big cases like that, take some famous cases on cultural issues, organizations that defend constitutional rights are out there everywhere. I can't imagine there's not a big 2A one doing that for these problems. And that you're not on your own if they kick your door down. And matter of fact, if they kick your door down, you can claim for damages. So the interested party thing bothered me because I've been involved in some public land stuff and lawsuits and
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
I've been standing. So
Representative, what's your point?
My point is the amendment that dealt with aggrieved party versus interested parties already been defeated, and my good
Granted.
friend from the center of the state keeps talking about that. This amendment has to do with unconstitutionality being added to the bill, not the aggrieved party versus interested party. Thank you.
Representative?
yeah, I acknowledge the good gentleman's comment there, and then I'll sit down.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Davis, for your first time, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm over here this day. Folks, I'm in favor of the Second Amendment, but the what if factor keeps coming in here. So, what if can go into all kinds of things. What if the sun don't come up? But, my point on this is that we're hearing back from my emails lit up. I'm hearing back from the people that are on the front line, and they're concerned with this. So I think by going with this amendment and see what it does on this bill here with that back in there. So I'm on and in favor of the amendment.
Representative Connolly, for your first time, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been listening to my law enforcement people, and I think I heard that the things that are out there are BS. I would really kind of resent that because I don't think my law enforcement people in the district that I represent are promoting such initials. So that's do what you want.
Thank you, Representative. Any other members for the first time on the amendment? Any other members? Representative, Representative Sherwood, please.
First for a second.
First for a second, Representative. Representative McCann.
Same, first for a second.
First for a second. Any other representative? Representative Campbell.
First for a second, Mr.
First for a second. Thank you, Representative. Any others? On the amendment, first time around on the amendment. Seeing none, all right. I don't want to miss you, Representative Stivar, if you want. All right, ready to go? Second time, Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hear I'm all in favor of the Second Amendment, but the Second Amendment says what it says. The Wyoming Constitution says what it says. I swore many times an oath to uphold that Constitution as it is written. And as long as it says what it says, I'm bound to that. We can make all kinds of eloquent arguments about, yeah, but in this case, or in this case, or in this case. And when you get all finished and you open up your Constitution, it still says the same thing. Your argument, you don't have a problem with me. You have a problem with the Constitution. If you think that's wrong, if you think what it says that's wrong, then try to change that. But until you change that, it says what it says. Shall not be infringed, shall not be denied, period.
Representative Wiley, for your second time, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't think I've heard anybody of this body get up here and say "and but." I've heard people of this body get up several times and defend the Second Amendment over and over and over again. But I will remind you that constitutionality of things are interpreted. That's why we have the courts, and that's why the courts are so important. I will also remind this body that we did a lot of this lift in 2022. Statutes were changed. There's language that's almost exact of what we're trying to do again, other than we're adding more penalties. Again, just because we're pro Second Amendment doesn't mean we have to be anti-law enforcement. And we have to think of those folks when we touch this stuff so they're safe and they can do their jobs. So we can go home at night, put our heads on our pillow, and feel good about not having our doors kicked in by somebody who doesn't follow law and order. Please consider this. I understand that this is a pertinent issue, and I'm not very eloquent when I speak, but this is important enough that we get it right. And if it has to go away and come back, so be it. That's what we're here for. That's what we raised our right hands for. This is not against the Second Amendment thing. This is making sure we get something done right.
Representative Haroldson, for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So a couple things. The last speaker just spoke. I fully agree with you. And I think the struggle that I have as we look at this entire conversation is, in some ways, I feel it has gone to the worst case scenario concept. One thing I want to address, the amendment that we passed in the beginning on the committee of the whole actually fixes what the good representative was asking about, in my opinion, and that is if there is that door kick down situation, we removed that section out of that part of statute and put it, so an interested party may bring a civil action suit, that gets brought over into the area that's talking about employment. So if a department is employing those that have a record of this, then there can be, because at that point, there's no actual individual that's been wronged, so an interested party can have that ability to bring suit. The only person in current statute that can bring suit is the one that has had their door kicked down. And I believe that is protected here. The constitutionality conversation, guys, because the courts are the ones that decide constitutionality, you can have someone that goes, I think this is constitutional. I think this is fine. And then the lawsuit comes, and then all of a sudden the courts are the ones saying, hey, by the way, that wasn't constitutional. And so I believe the constitutionality insertion actually creates more of a gray area than leaving it out and drawing a hard line of just don't enforce federal gun control, period. The unconstitutional adds in this element of, well, is it constitutional or is it not constitutional? And now I have to make that decision or that determination without a court's hearing. And I'm standing in a position, in a place as law officer or an agency going, hey, is it constitutional or not? And at the end of the day, every one of us, how many times have we been like, Speaker, I need a rules committee for constitutionality on this? And then we get up there and a dozen of us argue about what we think. I think at the end of the day, all of us have different opinions of what's constitutional and not constitutional. There's very clear lines that I think all of us agree on, but we get kind of down in the weeds sometime and go, well, what really is the constitutionality of this? And so when we put that language back in, what we do is, I think in that point, we create this gray area where now they're going, well, how do I interpret constitutionality? Anything currently, as the bill stands, anything that is federal gun control, you don't get to be a part of enforcing that. And I think that cleans it up. The constitutionality aspect is a concern. The last thing I want to bring up, this is just revisions and additions to current statute that we did pass before. So a lot of times when we look at that, you're like, a lot of the same language. Well, because it is the same language. We're just going in and we're doing some changes. We're bringing in a civil penalty, and then we're cleaning some of these areas up that, in my opinion, needed to be cleared up. And so to law enforcement, I've got law enforcement in my family. I've got a long line of law enforcement that I support. I love our law enforcement, but I also am here to protect the rights of the citizens. Do I think that we have sheriffs and chiefs around the state that are going to go in march into people's houses and take their guns. No, I don't. But it only takes one situation where one person gets put into a place and this takes place where all of a sudden our rights are destroyed and they're impinged upon. And so as we talk about a word constitutional, I don't believe constitutional should go in here because I believe at that point we create so much more gray area than we would ever find if we would have left it out.
Any other members for their second time? I have Wharf, Riggins, Bear, Davis, Connolly, Sherwood, McCann, and Campbell. Riggins. Please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I didn't necessarily agree with this. I'm not particularly in favor of this amendment. And the years it takes to determine that constitutionality is actually a valid argument. But sometimes I think we can see those things coming at us. If you'll take some federal legislation that's very specific that actually required us to sell our weapons, we see that coming. It'd be no problem to get the body in this state to get together in a special session and put a squash to that. In one session, say we are not going down that path, and we're just making it publicly known that we're not going to support that effort. And so I just see that as a tool that can be aimed exactly at a particular law coming from the federal government that does exactly what we most fear, and taking away your weapons at the federal level. Thank you very much.
Any other members for their second time? Representative Bear, for your second time?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to gently push back on the last comment of we can deal with it later if something comes from our federal government. We had a perfect example of this just a year ago, where in our oil and gas industry, a new bonding requirement came along. And our industry was not prepared for that, and nor were we. We scrambled, but people suffered for that. And when it comes to this type of a law that has to do with our constitutional rights based on our Bill of Rights, I think it's something that we should not wait. We should be prepared, and we should anticipate that we move further and further away from the constitutionality that we've all come to know and love, because folks, we're not getting closer and closer to the Constitution. That's why we had a debate about the Article 5 Constitutional Convention. And that was quite a passionate thing to argue about, but we have a responsibility to protect our citizens. That's what we swore an oath to do, to protect their constitutional rights. That's what this bill does, and that's what this amendment will get in the way of. On and opposed to the amendment.
Any other members for the second time? Second time on the amendment? Seeing none? None? Okay, back to the bringer. Representative Washington.
Thank you, members, for the debate on this very, very important topic. As I said the other day, there's probably no one in the room who spent as many days with a sidearm on their hip as I have, both when I was on the job and since I retired. This isn't about a view on the Second Amendment. This is really an issue about our peace officers. So let me give you a couple responses to some of the comments that were made. I heard that our right under the Wyoming State Constitution to bear arms in our own defense shall not be denied, period, as an absolute. So, can you not carry a firearm inside the Wyoming State Prison? Can you not carry a firearm on an airplane in certain sections of an airport? See, they're not absolute. We have exceptions. All of our rights, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, they're not absolute. They all have certain limitations. That's just the reality of the constitutional system that we live in. But let me give an example as a father of 3 daughters. We have a provision in federal law that is not duplicated in state law. Federal law says that if you're convicted of domestic violence, you lose your gun rights. And some people in the room go, yeah, that's horrible. Shouldn't happen. Imagine a situation like this. Your daughter calls you. Dad, he's upset again. He's been drinking. He's angry. He's throwing things. Oh my God, he's got a gun. And he storms out of the house. She calls 911, or her dad does. Police officer responds. Here's the story. Starts looking for this armed individual in the neighborhood. We don't have a state law to deal with this situation. We haven't needed it because we have a federal law that says if this man who's threatening this woman has already been convicted of domestic violence, he can't legally possess a gun. That's a federal law, not a state law. Some of you think it's unconstitutional. No court has ruled it's unconstitutional. See the position we put our Wyoming peace officers in if we don't have this unconstitutional language in there? We need clarity for our officers. Our officers will obey the law. They will follow the Constitution. But to take away from them the ability to even cooperate with federal law enforcement officers on a domestic violence case like this, it's just wrong. We've had that law for a long time. This legislature's had many years in which we could have taken up a discussion about domestic violence and firearms in our state, but we never have, probably because we didn't really want to have that conversation. But as a father of 3 daughters, when I get that phone call, I hope our peace officers have not been handcuffed. I hope our Wyoming peace officers can enforce the law to protect my daughter and your daughter and your daughter. Please vote aye.
Members, you're voting on Senate File 101, third reading amendment number 3. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. Division being called. All those in favor, please stand. Okay, you may be seated. All those opposed, please stand. All right, you may be seated. The amendment has not been adopted, 20-39. All right, next amendment for our consideration, Senate File 101. Let's see, that was number 3. Number 2, Representative Washit. Number 1, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 1, Senate File 101. Ask your favorable consideration. Members, I'm not going to belabor this. I know how the vote's going to turn out, but I have never in my entire time in the legislature brought, and I will, Mr. Speaker, withdraw this amendment at the appropriate time. Never in my history have I brought a enactment clause third reading amendment. It's a first for me, because I think it's really, really important that we get this right. Senate File 101 is ambiguous. Talk to people. I've talked to advocates. I've talked to people that support the bill. Then I've talked to other people. Guess what? They interpret it differently. It's ambiguous. And we're going to ask our peace officers to go out there and deal with an ambiguous piece of legislation in the real world when you got to make decisions quickly in what our Supreme Court has called rapidly evolving and uncertain times. No time to have a bunch of ambiguous law hanging over your head. This bill is also based upon a false premise that the only way we can keep our Wyoming peace officers from violating your constitutional rights and your next door neighbor's constitutional rights is to hang the sword of Damocles over their head with a $50,000 civil judgment on it. That's a false premise, ladies and gentlemen. Some of the most staunch Second Amendment advocates I know pin on a badge every day. Think about what it takes to get 23 type A personalities in 23 counties across Wyoming to agree on something. And your 23 sheriffs urged you to be cautious about this piece of legislation, what it might do to their operations, their ability to keep us safe. And that's not BS. That's sincere assessment of what this legislation might do. And because there's this disagreement about what does the law mean? Oh, it doesn't mean that. That's not how I read it. But then you talk to this person over here, they read it differently. And who gets to file the lawsuit? The person over there. Last year, we passed a bill dealing with religious freedom under the First Amendment. Remember that? And what was the enforcement mechanism for our First Amendment rights? Injunctive relief. You could go to the courts and the courts would say, stop. You can't do that. But in this bill, $50,000 personal cause of action lawsuits. I love my Second Amendment rights. I love my First Amendment rights. Seems a little odd that injunctive relief is sufficient to protect our First Amendment rights. The right to let me go to that prayer service this morning. But we need a $50,000 hammer to keep Second Amendment loving peace officers in line. False premise.
Any discussion? Representative Worf, first time.
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to try to be real brief. I know we got some things pulling at members of our body, but all I can say is the organization that is claiming to be representing law enforcement, all I can tell you is I remember back when we did constitutional right to carry, the same entity that's telling you to be afraid if this bill passes told us that if we adopted constitutional right to carry, that blood would flow in the streets. And I can tell you it didn't happen then, it didn't happen now. This bill is not what they're telling you it is. It's very simple. All they got to do is not allow our law enforcement guys be tasked with going and seizing firearms, ammunition, or accessories. That's what this bill does, nothing more. It adds a civil penalty, like they said. All the other stuff is already in statute. The criminal stuff is in there already. But with that, I would say, vote this bill forward. Let's move forward with this. Thank you.
Representative Sherwood, please, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Body, I would contend that this bill is a boogeyman. I want to be really clear with you. This bill does not solve a Wyoming problem. This administration is not coming for our guns. No one in this building is coming for our guns. The bill erodes the ability for our local law enforcement officers to protect us from violence. And I trust my local law enforcement officers because I sit with them in the pews, I see them at the grocery store, and I volunteer with them at community events. Our Wyoming peace officers are honest men and women who work hard to preserve our freedoms. This bill criminalizes them from doing their jobs. Vote no on the bill.
Representative Clouston, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I've always supported this. A couple things give me pause. Our good chairman that spoke against this, that gives me pause. My sheriff, who's been a friend of mine for 30 years and is elected by my whole county, asked me, do you trust me or do you trust some outside influences? So that gives me pause. The other thing that gives me pause is I wonder how this law would have affected the protests and situations going on in the Great Lakes state. How would have our federal law enforcement maybe been handcuffed in dealing with those protests that were affecting our citizens? So if someone could look at that aspect for me, I'd like some answers with that. Thank you.
Representative Thayer, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The good bringer of this amendment, pointed out.
Representative Davis. I identified Representative Thayer. I usually go ladies first. I try that. Yes, sir. But anyway, Representative Thayer.
At least we got to laugh. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I firmly support mine in your Second Amendment rights and the right to bear arms. But at this time, I have to pause also, as other speakers have said. I need to support the local law enforcement, my family and friends, and this bill is too vague. It leaves too much to interpretation. We had or have in 2022 a great bill, and we got national accolades on it. So at this time, I cannot support this bill.
Representative Davis. You're good? Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe our law officers have also taken an oath to uphold the Constitution. And, with that, when they're questioning this bill as it sits right now, I have to take that really close to my heart. And so I must do the same thing. I'm questioning this. So anyway, thank you.
Representative Heft.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question in my head is, how did we get here? I wish I was a more eloquent speaker on this subject. I'm very passionate about my rights. People's rights have been violated with no recourse. I could give you several circumstances that had in other states where they came in the dark, broke down doors, and these were federal agents that did such things, notified the news so it could be splashed everywhere. An individual murdered in his home, his rights violated, and no recourse for his family. That's what we're talking about here. I support, anyone who knows me knows I support law enforcement. My county sheriff's a friend of mine. I hope this doesn't drive a wedge between us. I think he knows better than to violate somebody's rights. We've had administrations that have allowed this kind of behavior. And we want to let the state of Wyoming know that we will not support our rights being infringed on because of a rogue federal government. Everyone deserves their day in court. Everyone deserves their rights to be protected. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Pendergraft, first time.
First for a second.
First for a second, Representative. Any other member? Representative Guggenmoss.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First or second?
Thank you, Representative. First for a second. Anyone else on the amendment? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have 3 sheriffs that are uneasy with this bill as written. 3 counties. I trust them all. They are my experts. And if this bill is written, puts them in a bad spot. And so I believe I will be a no. Thank you.
Any other members for their first time? Representative Campbell. Representative, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess we'll be opposed to the bill and wanted to address a comment earlier about maybe not paying attention or giving much credence to the association that represents some of our law enforcement. And I absolutely appreciate that. I do. So I personally, I spoke with our sheriff. I spoke with our chief of police. I spoke with our captains, our lieutenants, our sergeants. I had the conversation with them. And they shared their concerns with me, especially in those situations of domestic violence. And we probably have more of that happening in Natrona County than I would, well, definitely more than I would like, in those situations. And the challenges we're going to put them in and prevent them from being able to do their job. So I will absolutely be voting against the bill, not because I don't support the Second Amendment. I absolutely do. And as the good chair of our first committee said, yes, the government will not deny our rights. And they can be restricted. They can be limited. They are. And legally, there's a difference between restricting and denying. So can we restrict them? Should we? Yeah, on occasion, we need to in those domestic violence situations. So absolutely support the Second Amendment, and we'll be voting no for my local law enforcement.
Representative Baer, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First for a second, please.
First for a second. Any other members, first time on the amendment? Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question for you. Is there a Second Amendment without a Constitution? I think the answer is no.
Any other members for their first time on the amendment? Representative McCann.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just first for a second, please.
Thank you, Representative. First for a second. Any other members, first time on the amendment? Seeing no one rushing to the microphones, on to the second go round. Any member want to speak second go round, second time on the amendment? I have Wharf, Sherwood, Clouston, Thayer, Davis, Heft, Pendergraft, Guggenmoss, Williams, Campbell, Alyssa, Baer, Provenza, and McCann. Any of those members would like to speak second time? Representative Wharf.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the interest of time, I'm not going to say much. I'm just going to say my piece and sit down. But every example that I've heard, whether it was in this chamber or in the other chamber or in committee meetings, all these examples that were given where we're told that we're causing harm to our law enforcement is just simply not true. The reality is the example that was given on the floor about domestic disturbances. What would be the call out on that? It's a domestic disturbance, yes, with a handgun, but the purpose of that is not to go seize a firearm. And you need to understand that. It's very clear. What it's saying is solely, it says solely in the interest of regulating firearms, ammunition, and accessories. And that's what this bill does. It does not extend beyond that, but I will challenge you. I know you've seen the same emails that I've seen, the same texts. A lot of you shared them with me. Every one of them start with a crime. The crime is what instigates law enforcement's actions. That does not apply to Senate File 101, okay? Can't make it any more clear than that. They're dealing with a specific issue that is not seizing firearms, ammunition, or accessories. And if you don't know what accessories are or ammunition, I think you all know what firearms are. But I can tell you, this is making a mountain out of a molehill. And I do apologize for referring to this as BS. This is important, but I do want you to all go back and look at the text, the emails that you've got, and ask yourself, did this start with another crime? Because if there's another crime that caused the law enforcement to respond, that's not what this is dealing with. This just deals with orders coming down from the federal government to take action that none of my law enforcement friends want to do. And I guarantee you the sheriffs don't want to do this. I'm not sure why they're opposing it. I don't know why they were afraid of constitutional right to carry, but they sure were. I would say, hopefully when this is pulled, this amendment is pulled, that you can vote aye on the bill. Thank you.
Representative McCann, second time, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really debated whether to comment on this because I've taken care of law enforcement officers pretty much my whole career. I've backed off asking this question, but I've asked numerous of them, dozens. You know, it's usually around some sort of event that stirs up the anti-gun crowd and we're gonna ban this and ban that. And I've asked them, if they decide to ban these guns, you're gonna be asked to go door to door to get them. Are you going to do it? And every one of them has said no. Every single one of them. Just following orders. Really? Principle over paycheck? Really? I think COVID just proved that. Thank you.
Any other members for the second time? Second time, seeing no one headed to the microphones, back to the bringer, Representative Washut.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We all want to get to lunch. I understand that. I know we're going to vote here in just a moment. I'd like to conclude with just one thought. All of our sheriffs take an oath to support and defend the Constitution. All of our sheriffs get elected by more people than I think any of us. And say, well, I don't understand why they're opposed to this legislation. I do know why they're opposed to this legislation. It's ambiguous and it's based on the false premise that it's needed. Many of you are sitting in your seats right now squirming a bit saying, I don't want to be characterized as anti-law enforcement. And others are squirming in their seats saying, I don't want to be characterized as anti-gun. And then I heard, I hope this doesn't drive a wedge. It's a wedge issue, folks. We can't sit on the fence. Do you support your peace officers back home? When you go home and you meet with your deputy sheriffs and your town police officers and your police chief and sheriff, you walk downstairs and see these troopers, what are you going to say to them? Will you be comfortable telling them, oh, those people don't know what they're saying? Your sheriff doesn't understand. This law is perfectly clear. I don't know how 23 sheriffs can be misinterpreting it. With that, please keep these things in mind, Mr. Speaker. I withdraw my amendment respectfully.
Without objection, the body amendment has been withdrawn. Members, you are voting on, let's see, let's go back. Let's get the verbiage right here. Senate File 101, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand, Andrew, Angelos, Banks, Bear, Brady, Bratton, Brown Gary, Brown Landon, Byron, Campbell Elisa, Campbell Kevin, Chestick, Clouston, Connolly, Davis, Erickson, Filer, Hornstrom, Geringer, Guggenmoss, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Heft, Jarvis, Johnson, Kelly, excused, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson JT, Lawley, Lean, Locke, Lucas, McCann, Nicholas, Ottman, Pendergraft, Posey, Provenza, Riggins, Rodriguez Williams, Schmid, Sherwood, Singh, Smith, Storer, Strock, Stivar, Tarver, Thayer, Washut, Wasserberger, Webb, Weber, Worf, Williams, Winter, Wiley, Yin. Mr. Speaker, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 40 aye, 21 no, 1 excused.
Senate File 101, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 101 has passed the House. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House stand in recess until 2:45.
Committee announcements. Representative Washut, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Due to the late adjournment and signing ceremonies, your committee number 1 will be postponing our interim topics discussion until tomorrow at noon.
Thank you, Representative. Any Representative Locke, Chairman Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your number 3 Revenue Committee will be doing the interim topics review tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock in room 6.
Thank you. Representative Weber, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Select Committee on Legislative Facilities, Technology, and Process will meet today at 1:30 in Public Meeting Room 20, or in Public Meeting Room 4 to discuss interim topics.
Thank you, Representative. Any other members? Representative Knapp, Chairman Knapp.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Your Management Audit Committee will meet at 4 p.m. or on adjournment in E005 for interim topics.
Thank you, sir. Any others announcements on committees or otherwise? Representative Winter, Chairman Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Ag Committee is meeting in room number 5 down in the hole here and to discuss these other interim topics. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate that. Any others? No announcements? All right, you've heard the motion of the good majority floor leader. All those in favor of the House being back at 2:45. House stands adjourned until then. Signify by saying aye. Okay, Mel's no. Thank you. It's stand at recess until 2:45. We've got to go do something about all this water I'm drinking.